Hello viewers, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will be talking about how to derive the treatment emergent flag in the crossover studies, but while considering the partial date. So before we go to the data, let's understand first how the partial date can impact the derivation. In many studies, the conservative approach for the derivation of the treatment emergent flags depends on the imputation of the AE start date when the AE start date is not complete or is partial. So the normal or the conservative method which is used in most of the studies is that if the day is unknown, then if the month and year of the AE start date matches with the month and year of the treatment exposure start date, then we will impute the day of the adverse event start date as the same as the exposure start date. Whereas if it is not same, then we will assign it as the first day of the month. Second approach is that if the month is unknown, then if the year matches with the year of the treatment exposure start date, then we will impute the month of the AE start date with the exposure start date. And if it is not same, then we will assign it to January. That is the first month of the year. And in the case if the year is unknown, then the date will not be imputed. So considering all these factors, let's see how this will impact the derivation of the treatment emergent flag in the crossover studies as well as in parallel studies, but majorly in crossover studies. So right now I'm showing you a dummy data, that is the dummy data for adverse event, SDTM adverse event for two of the subjects, subject 1 and subject 2. Subject 1 has experienced two adverse events. One is fever and the other is headache. And the second subject has experienced one adverse event, which is back pain. If you notice here that the AE start date for all these adverse event is partial. The subject 1 has only the day part missing for the fever adverse event, whereas for headache, only the year is present. And for the second subject, again, the situation is same that we do have only the day part missing. Now, let's assume that the the treatment start date for both of these subject is 14th of May 2016. Now, coming again, considering for the parallel study first, let's see how the adverse event start date for fever will be imputed in this scenario. Now, the adverse event start date is May 2016. And when we see the treatment start date here, again, the month and year is May and year is 2016. So it is same as the AE start date. So since it is same, the imputation logic, which is normally followed in major of the studies, says that if the month and year of the AE start date is same as the treatment start date, then we will impute the day parts same as the treatment start date. So here the imputed ASTDT will become as the 14th of May. So what we have done is we have imputed the 14th of the treatment start date in the AE start date here. And we will mark the treatment emergent as Y. Similarly, when we talk about the second scenario where we have only the year present, in that scenario, how will we do the imputations? Now, since we have only the year, we can compare only the year with the treatment start date. So in this example, again, the year is, since the year of both these dates are same, we will keep the day and month part same for the ASTDT. So what we have done is we will impute the ASTDT with the treatment start date as the complete date here. And again, since we have imputed the month and day part, the imputation flag will be M and the treatment flag will be populated as Y. Now let's consider the second subject where there is a slight difference to note here is that the adverse event start date for back pain is happening on June 2016. And if we see the treatment start date, it is May 2016. So here the month is not same as the treatment start date. So in this approach, we will not uh, keep the day part of the treatment start date, but instead we will mark the first of this month, that is first of June in this scenario, as the imputed date. So in this case, your ASTDTC, the ASTDT imputed date will become as the first of June 2016. And since we imputed only the day part, the imputation flag will be D and treatment is populated as Y. So this is the example which we can do, the logic which we can follow for a parallel study where we have only one treatment start date, because we know that in the parallel study, the subject is exposed to only one drug throughout the study. So once that drug is exposed to the studies, that will mark the treatment start date and it will not change uh, during the tenure of the study. However, this is not true for the crossover studies. So in crossover study, we know that based on the number of periods in the studies, each period will have a different drug assigned to the subject. So each drug will have its own start and end date, which will give us multiple treatment start dates in the crossover study. So to understand that the adverse event which is happening falls under which period and hence is related to which study drug, we will have to consider all these start dates while deriving the treatment flag. So now let's take the same example which I have taken earlier here. So right now, I will be considering only the first subject where we have two adverse events. First adverse event is fever and the second is headache. So for first one, let's consider the first fever first. So now in this case, we know that the adverse event happened on May 2016. So in this case, you will see that there are in three periods defined for this study, this crossover studies, and because we are having drug A, drug B, and drug C exposure given to this subject in all these three periods respectively. So if we talk about the first period is starting on 3rd of April 2016, and your second period is starting on 16th of May 2016, and the third period is starting on 28th of June 2016. So now, if we see the date, which is May 2016, here again we will follow the same imputation concept which we have done in parallel study, but we will compare this date, this imputation date with all these three dates, and we will see that in which window this date falls the best. So in this example, the first period start date is having a month of April to and year as 16. So in this record, you can see that we can either assign the first scenario is that we assign the imputation date as 1st of May. Why? Because the month of the period start date or the first drug exposure date, that is drug A start date, is not having the month same as the treatment start date. So because of that, what we can do is we can assign the day part as the 1st of May here. If we want to check that this adverse event is starting in your first first study drug treatment start date, if that is the case. The second scenario is that if we go to the second period and the second treatment start date, the month is same as your as your adverse event start date month here. So in this example scenario for fever adverse event, you can create, you will need to create two records in Adam ADA dataset. One where you will impute the ASTDT, which will be corresponding to your first treatment period, and hence the ASTDTC will be 1st of May 2016, and the second you will have to consider the 16th May treatment start date, which will again go to the adverse event will become as the 16th of May 2016, because here the month and year part is same for both the treatment start date for period 2 and the adverse event start date. So we will copy the day part of your uh, second treatment start date to impute your AESTDTC. Why we do this is that we are considering the treatment first as well as treatment 2 period dates and creating two records, because we want to make sure that we are not missing any data when we are uh, imputing the dates, because we will try to compensate that every adverse event, if it is happening because of any study drug, should be taken into account. So to avoid any misrepresentation of the data, what we have done is we have taken this study drug exposure also into account, because we do not know that this adverse event, which started on May 2016, was resulted because of the first period drug exposure or the second period drug exposure. So to make sure that we do not misrepresent, we are giving a scenario there where we are considering that if this is happening because of the first study drug exposure, then we will consider the 1st of May as the start date here for the adverse event. So that is the reason we have having two records for fever in ADAE in for crossover study here. The second scenario is for the headache, and again the headache was having only the ear part. So the ear part is same for all these three treatment periods. So because of that, we will again create three records for this headache uh, adverse event in your ADAE for crossover studies, where your imputed date for adverse event start date will have one for each period. What means that one record we will create for the scenario where your imputed date is same as the first period start date, second record where you have the imputed date same as the second period start date, and the third record where you have the imputed date as the third period start date, to make sure that we are taking into consideration all these drugs into consideration, that this AE can happen because of any drug exposure in this scenario. So in this way, when you are having any partial dates in your SDTM AE for a crossover studies, you will have to check for each period start date, and accordingly you will either need to create, or you will need to only create one record or more than one record, depending how your impartial dates fall for these period start dates. That's all for today. Let me know in comments if you want me to cover any specific topic.